Oh, it's your first time? Which
You're welcome. I'll be back. When I said no last time, right, it was at a city council meeting, and they held me up. Okay, they were telling me you cannot come into the room. After I was already in the room, okay, and then the lieutenant, white dude, deal with them all the time. I'm just throwing a name out. I forget his name. Anyways, he comes over and he's like, the upper command, and he asks them what's going on. And I'm like, dude, they're trying to search me for no reason, and I politely said no. And then I asked them their RAS, right, reasonable, articulable suspicion of crime. And with reason, right? I could be like, okay, yeah, you should search them. But if no one gives you any reason to, right, it shouldn't be an instant go to violate people's Fourth Amendment, right, to have their privacy. And when he saw that, he was like, go ahead and go in. Because, you know what I mean? And then the people that I noticed that you were searching were the commissioners. I know you don't know who they are, right? That's the catch with it. But it doesn't look good when I see board members getting searched on the way in, and it's their meeting. So, and trust me, dude, I'm all about you guys searching for reasonable things, right? Like, hey, this guy looks like, he's mad, or there's animosity happening, right? Like, I could completely agree with you guys, and I'm not here to stop you guys from doing it, right? I'm here to just inform the citizens and residents of their rights to also say no, right? And I hope that's also taken respectfully. Nothing against anyone. But I just wanted to explain to you the whole situation, so you kind of see it from the other side. Because I see it from your guys' side too. Trust me, there's a lot of dangerous people out there, and we expect protection. But if we're going to do this, we might as well set up a security checkpoint and do it equally across the board, so that way no one ever feels like it's targeted. So, What's the group? Is that Parks? And Rangers? Must be some big bobcats. Already.
right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 6:02. Let's see. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Commission to order. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Carlson, Commissioner Paddock, Commissioner Robinson Opido, Commissioner Witzel,
Present.
Co-Chair Merino,
Present.
and Chair Cabral.
Present.
Commissioner Montoya Cecina, and then Commissioner Pacheco.
We have a 3.1 approval of meeting minutes. The next item, 3.1, the approval of meeting minutes dated May the 8th, 2024, was our special meeting. And those minutes should have been in your agenda. Is there a motion to approve item 3.1?
Motion to approve.
I second it.
All right. That was Marina. Hold on. I'm writing things down. I'm sorry. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right, the item passes. Open public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? I've received 3 requests to speak. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is there a John Acosta?
Good afternoon. My name is John Acosta, and I'm an advocate for the senior community and shelter community in Chula Vista. And I've been trying to get through public records. I've been trying to get information on how much they have spent on the shelter program and what are the results. I've also been trying to get the information on how many micro homes are there, and how many are they being used and for how long. Also, I've been asking to see what are the results after the person stays there and for how long and what happens after them. Is there a follow-up? I also have asked them to give me information regarding about the population of the people that use sheltered little homes. Is there single adults, disabled, seniors, females with family, person with pets, and I have not received any information. I also asked about the experience of those working in the programs, what kind of experience they had. I have not received any information regarding that. I also asked them how much they make. And I still did not get information on that. All that is public record or public information. I cannot receive any information regarding that. I asked them, because the crisis on shelter is getting worse in Chula Vista. And every time I talk to someone, they always say, well, that's somebody else's area. So, nobody's taking the responsibility of, taking care of the shelter simply because they point the finger to somebody else. Somebody needs to man up, and say, okay, that is my responsibility. If that's not my area, I'm going to get somebody to take care of the problem instead of pointing the finger to somebody else, and instead of saying, well, that's not my area. The thing is, the governor said you guys have need to either take care of the problem or they're going to take the funding away. The thing is, you guys are not doing that well. Not you, but the people that are working with the unsheltered program, they're not doing the job. I don't see it improving. As a matter of fact, I don't see it getting worse. The marina is there's a lot of unsheltered people that are in front of the Seven Seas casino. There's a lot of unsheltered people. And Hilltop Little Park is getting with unsheltered people. So my question is, what is the money going to? I mean, I don't see no progress, no benefits, no results. What I'd like to know, how much experience those people working with unsheltered have. Because if they just get a job because they know somebody or because they got a degree in college without experience of working with unsheltered, that's foolish. Because they're just wasting the time, they're wasting the taxpayers' money without no results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta. All right, is it Elizabeth Wilson Manahan?
I didn't wish to speak, I just put in that I was opposed to the plan.
Okay, thank you. I also have a wish to speak, although he was unable to stay. So I'm going to go ahead and read his comment. This is from Salvador. Looks like it's Vicurio. Pardon me if I don't get the last name correct. Greetings. As a resident of Chula Vista, Walnut Avenue, we have struggled with the irregular homeless encampment near Highway 5 and Palomar Street and adjacent Walnut Avenue. This is a commercial and residential area. There are several places in Chula Vista which have been marginalized by the encampments and the disorder that accompanies them. Those of us in Chula Vista margins listed area deserve some safety, cleanliness, and order, which nowadays are exclusive to the more affluent areas of Chula Vista. I respectfully request the Chula Vista government to enact and enforce laws to prevent and stop this situation to continue. Okay, and that's the last request to speak. Next item is 5.1.
Just for the record, there was one e-comment received. The comment is from Robert Johnson to audit July 8th, 24th.
Okay, next item is 5.1. Consider restrictions for campsites and sitting, lying, sleeping, or storage on specified public property.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Stacy Kurtz, Director of Housing and Homeless Services. Tonight we have both Angelica Davis, our Homeless Solutions Manager, and Lieutenant Ernesto Pinedo here to talk to you. Oh, and as well, our Assistant City Attorney, Megan McClurg, to provide you with a presentation. This is in response to council referrals that we received back in December of last year. And so they're going to go a little more into detail about what that referral was and how we're responding to it through this item. Tonight's action is asking for you to make an advisory recommendation to our City Council on certain aspects relating to restrictions on camping, sitting, lying, and sleeping on certain public properties. And so it's a very specific ask for you this evening to advise our council in a future ordinance decision that will be before them. And we're expecting that in September likely. So with that, I'll turn it over to Angelica Davis.
Thank you, Stacy, and good evening. Ooh, that is louder. So I will begin with the state of homelessness in the city of Chula Vista. So aside from the mandated national count, Chula Vista conducts its own independent count. Our last count was conducted on the 13th of August. As you can see, the concentration is primarily on the west side, particularly along the I-5 corridor and transit stations. A change from last year is that we found that there are more individuals moving east. We also saw a reduction in the number in the OVRP, that's the Otay Valley Regional Park in the south area of our city. Overall, the numbers are pretty consistent with the national point-in-time count and the last Chula Vista point-in-time count that was conducted in September of 2023, with the number going down from 730 to 786. Again, I do want to highlight that the number of those reported utilizing the external voucher program is undercounted. This is in part because we currently don't have a mechanism in place to require service providers to submit regular reporting, which we'll discuss in another slide. For detailed demographic information, you can access that in our website. We will be presenting it on the September 10th meeting. Again, it'll be through our website and if you would like to attend the City Council meeting. So this slide is a side-by-side comparison of the point-in-time count that Chula Vista did in 23 and in 2024. And as I mentioned, you can see there's more people heading east and less concentration on the south side in the OVRP. Since 2016, when the homeless outreach program began, we recognized the need for resources to respond to the growing issues. Fast forward 8 years later, we have designed a model that provides a variety of services to help our unsheltered. In response to these impacts, the city recognized first the importance of having the right team. We focus on proactive and regular outreach to the unsheltered and the community as a whole, including the residents and our businesses. We understand the need to offer a range of housing options based on the individual needs, from detox, transitional to permanent housing. We created a program that not only provides job training and reentry, but assists our rangers with cleaning and maintaining our city free of trash and debris. We're also looking into policies that will help us mitigate the impacts to our community, which is the subject of tonight's meeting. As I mentioned, having the right team is crucial. Under the direction of the city manager and corresponding directors, these 4 key departments form the city's hot team. This allows the city to address all aspects of the impacts to the city and offer the right services. From housing services, safety, cleanup efforts, and code enforcement for both public and private. The team also works closely and relies on contracted partners such as McAllister and Alpha Project, as well as external services providers, additional services such as our per clinician, public benefits, detox, and medical attention. Again, the key to the success and the city's efforts involves having the appropriate departments to meet each goal. Chula Vista is fortunate to have dedicated staff from the police department, policing unit, public works ranger program, housing and homeless services, development services, code enforcement, and a dedicated per clinician from the County of San Diego. Some of our members are here tonight, including Lieutenant Pinedo here next to me and Sam Alzubaidi sitting in the front. While we aim to address the myriad of needs of our clients, housing is the ultimate goal. We offer a variety of housing options depending on their level of need. This data is taken from our dashboard with reporting information starting October 2023. It is also important to note that we have made many attempts to connecting with our clients. It's not always easy to have them accept services, so it is very important to us to note that we are out there making as many touch points, hoping that they will be open to our services. We're very proud of the work that the team is doing. However, there are still the negative impacts from the number of unsheltered in our community. And for this, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Pinedo. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica. Good afternoon, members. And because of the high number of unsheltered in our city and the statutory restrictions, there has been a consistent increased calls for service for illegal activity, including drugs, prostitution, theft, and assaults. Along with this comes a significant amount of trash, debris from encampments. A great concern for our protected habitats, such as the Otay Valley Regional Park, are fire hazards that result from encampments. An example was this past weekend with 4 different fires ignited in the OVRP. And to include that, on top of that, we had one today where we did see a male running away from, hopefully we can identify him in the near future. So that's 5 over the last couple of days. All of these impacts are magnified due to the close proximity to the sensitive areas such as schools, transit stations, and corridors, as well as parks and open spaces, such as the Otay Valley Regional Park. When we presented the proposed options back in October and December to council, we included a timeframe for completion. Priority was given to items 1 and 2. We are still exploring options to work with the service providers under item 1. For consideration was to amend the municipal code by adding specific licensing standards and requirements for service providers operating in our city and placing individuals and households in hotels and motels. Today's items, number 2 is an ordinance which will be going to council September 10th to address camping in areas considered sensitive, as previously mentioned. Item 3 is already a practice in place which meets and exceeds state standards policies. 4 and 5 will be addressed by establishing standard operating procedures as part of the city's unsheltered crisis strategic plan. And now I'll pass it on to Megan McClurk to discuss recent developments with encampment regulations.
Previously, the legal landscape was a little bit complicated for cities in this area, and you might have heard information on the news about it, but basically the Ninth Circuit, which is the appellate court that covers California, had decided a case and said that criminally enforcing a camping on public property ordinance is illegal. It violates the Eighth Amendment if there are not sufficient appropriate shelter beds available in any community. So most cities were struggling with enforcing encampment restrictions because they had to, under those provisions, ensure that there were sufficient shelter beds available for the entire unsheltered population in their community. As a lot of you probably heard, in June of this year, June 28th, the Supreme Court actually overturned that Ninth Circuit decision and held that it was not a violation of the Eighth Amendment to enforce those camping restrictions, even if sufficient shelter was not available. And they really kind of left it up to states and cities to at least take care of their public rights of way and public property. So this has influenced, obviously, what we are and aren't able to do. Following that, just about a month later in July, the governor of California, you may have heard, issued an executive order ordering state agencies and departments to start clearing encampments on public property. His order was only a specific order as to state agencies, because those are the ones he specifically controls, but he did encourage local cities to adopt similar policies as the ones laid out for state agencies. After that executive order was issued, cities started to pass ordinances restricting encampments. You might have heard the governor made some statements about cities potentially losing funding if they don't start enforcing cleanups on public property. So there is more of an impetus in local communities to start doing something about this issue. And because there is clearer legal guidance, I think more communities feel comfortable moving forward in this realm because we have a little more direction on what we can and can't do. So you may have seen in the local area, at least recently, Vista, Escondido have passed provisions. San Diego already had provisions in effect. They might just end up, I think, enforcing in a different way than they did before. But you're seeing more and more cities start to address this issue around San Diego County and throughout the state. I think Palm Springs, Paso Robles also within the last month have passed new ordinances related to encampments on public property. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the proposal that staff is bringing to council, or hoping to bring to council and looking for your feedback on tonight, is kind of twofold. And the direction, which was previously discussed with council, is not necessarily a citywide ban, but more targeted restrictions in certain areas that tend to be more dangerous to public safety or more sensitive environmentally. And it's divided into kind of two areas. So one addresses sitting, lying, sleeping, or storing personal property on public property. And you'll see those three things outlined. This would be prohibited at all times. Blocking ADA access on public rights of way. This has been an issue where people with disabilities can't get by with sufficient areas clear in the right of way. So that would never be allowed. If they obstruct or interfere with permitted city events, that would not be allowed. And if it obstructs vehicle or bike paths, those would also not be allowed. Those are just the general, at any time, anywhere, none of these things can happen, or those people need to the city can remove their items and have them moved to another location. The second part of the ordinance would be what we kind of call encampment restrictions. And these are basically people setting up camp in specific locations that are considered sensitive locations. So the first, as you see on this, is public and private schools. So the provisions would prohibit encampments within 500 feet of public or private schools in grades 1 through 12, within 500 feet of city parks and within city parks, within 500 feet of emergency or transitional housing facilities. So that would include the shelter, homeless shelter, any type of safe camping or safe parking locations in the city. And the reason behind that is that the city really wants to encourage those locations. And if they end up just being a hub for unregulated activity, people typically don't want them in their communities or anywhere around there. So the idea is to keep those areas clear so they can actually be used within the boundaries of where they're intended to be used and not end up being a draw for unauthorized encampments. That fourth area is major transit stops. I think you saw on the map that those are large areas where people end up camping. And we do have people really moving in and out of those areas, so they need to stay clear. That includes trolley stops and rapid bus service. And then the last area is what's called multiple species conservation program land. That's defined in our municipal code. And those are basically sensitive environmental habitats. You see the two examples on here, the Otay Valley Regional Park and the Sweetwater Regional Park. And as you heard Officer Pineda mention, we've had fires break out in those areas. Also, some of the times those encampments, human waste, trash, things like that can cause environmental disturbances in those areas. And we do have an obligation to keep those areas safe environmentally. So these will be a progressive series of maps that show you what would be covered within each of these particular sensitive areas. So schools is the first one. And you can see with the green areas as the next schools. There you go. Sorry, and then this green one is parks. The next area would be sensitive habitat. So those are the environmentally sensitive areas. And then the last one is transit stops. So these would be the areas essentially in the city that you could not camp in these areas. And what the provisions of the ordinance say is that the city would provide 24 hours notice that they would need to remove that encampment unless there's whenever there's an immediate danger to public health or safety, those encampments can be cleared right away in order to prevent an immediate hazard. But the standard would be 24 hours posted notice that they would need to remove their stuff and leave the area, the protected area. And then if people don't leave, the city could take their things and store them. We are required to store them. The state is recommending 60 days. Our practice traditionally has been 90 days. We store people's belongings and allow them the opportunity to come and retrieve them within that 60 to 90-day window. But the provisions would require that standard notice so people have an opportunity to leave. And if they haven't left, we would store their property. We typically wouldn't store things that are obviously contraband. We wouldn't store that for them. Also, anything that's perishable or so clearly waste or trash, then those things typically are not stored. But most other things are. And if you asked Sam about it, they spend a lot of time picking up people's things, bagging them, tagging them, and making sure that if these people want their things back, that they're available for them to retrieve. So this is a map with everything on it that you just saw all combined into one. These would be the areas where people would not be allowed to set up encampments. And then again, with the first slide that we had, they also wouldn't be able to block those ADA areas, bike or vehicle paths. And then in areas where there's a city permit, like Lemon Festival, something like those types of things, you couldn't be sitting, sleeping, or lying in those areas. So this is kind of to give you an overview of what would be covered under the current proposed provisions. And I think that's it. So we are available if you have questions, and then also just to hear your comments or thoughts on this.
I had a question. When you were speaking about the ADA access and city permit and the motor vehicles or bike paths, you referred that would be mostly on the west side, but shouldn't that be citywide?
Oh, that's citywide. Yes,
It is
absolutely.
citywide.
That is citywide, correct. Both of those things.
And then the second question I had was in regard to transit stops. Is it possible to consider more than just the major transit stop? Because there's transit stops that go from the west side to the east side on those corridors. And what's going to happen if they're going to be prohibited from staying on the west side, they're going to migrate to the east side.
So I believe there are some rapid bus stops that are we don't have any trolley stops on the east side, obviously, but we do have rapid bus stops that go into the east side. So those would be considered areas that they would be prohibited from encamping on. There was discussion, and I might let staff speak to that. There was discussion about other types of bus stops. And I think, yeah, if staff wants to comment on that.
We did discuss including all of the stops, but at that point, it would canvass practically the entire city. Was there any other comment on that, Stacy?
No, I mean, the focus really was on using a definition that's widely used around major transit stop, which is basically 15-minute intervals that transit is servicing that particular area. So there was discussion in particular about some bus stops where more shelter is being provided for shading purposes and potentially including those. But again, as Angelica mentioned, that does, end up covering an even more a large area of the city if we were to do that. And obviously there's bus routes all over the place in the city. So at this point, this is staff's recommendation.
And I will say most other cities that have regulations related to transit stops do just identify major transit stops. And then the other thing I would say is, I think staff's intention, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but was to come with these initial provisions and then assess what is needed, what's workable, and that it be a flexible document in the sense that we could come back and alter it or change locations if there's a need for it. But obviously, as you can imagine, this is a large undertaking to enforce even just these locations, given the existing staff that we have.
I don't know if this is possible. Is it possible for you to hear kind of the impact from Sam, what he sees, what he sees the pros and the cons might be, and because I mean he's out there all the time and he's been there from the beginning, and I'd like to kind of get from Sam some feedback on this.
Good morning,
Sorry about
everyone.
that.
Or good afternoon. So yeah, I actually started this back in 2014, just kind of cleaning up the parks. Usually what I tell individuals, parks are a place where people come enjoy and have a good time, and we're just trying to make sure that people are following the rules by not drinking and smoking. Working with the team in 2016, the amount of debris and feces, not only are we finding in the parks, but on the streets, but in the shopping carts. At the end of the day, we're not here to hurt anybody. We're here to beautify Chula Vista and make it a clean and safe environment for everyone. But it's difficult because you have to have a heart to do this position. I respect everybody. I've worked with a lot of people in this room. And at the end of the day, we just got to make sure that people are following the rules. And that's what we're all about. When COVID hit, it was a nightmare. We saw a lot, we did a lot, and we are working with individuals trying to help them. And we continue to do that day in and day out. Anything else, James?
What do you think the impact of these changes or this might cause, or how do you feel it's going to positively or not so positively?
I think it's going to be positive. The individuals that I encounter on a day-to-day basis posting 24-hour notices, people are not angry with what I do. They respect what I do because they understand that at the end of the day, we're here to help each other. A lot of these individuals, they want to be out on the street. There is help for individuals if they want the help. And working with the team at the end of the day, I've seen it. I can discuss with you guys, we had a situation at Roar Park where my team was actually citing this vehicle, and after the third citation, we white carded the vehicle. Come to find out, there's a lady that was hiding from us, which we didn't know about until I got a call from the officers at midnight saying, "Hey, Sam, we have a situation here." I just told them to let her be for the night. We'll come back with the team, and we actually were able to help her by getting her some gas, jumping her battery, and getting her into the shelter. It was an amazing story, and that's what we're about. It's just changing lives day in and day out. And like Angelica said, we have the Work for Hope program, we have the Alpha Project program. So if people want to get the help that they need, it's there for them. So I'm a true believer. I actually live out in Menifee, but I come out here. I've been working here for 25 years because I want to make that change. So I hope I answered all your questions.
Thank you for that, Sam.
Thank you.
I have a question, Sam, before you go. You mentioned COVID. You saw a lot of changes. What does the population look like that you have seen since then? So I know we've talked a lot about the drugs and damages and things like that. But what are you seeing?
When COVID hit, it was a nightmare. I have 3 boys. You didn't know what was going to happen the next day. So I think people lost their motivation. A lot of individuals were scared, were nervous. A lot of people turned to drugs and just doing stuff that they didn't know what was going to happen the next day. And working day in and day out, cleaning up the city, talking to these individuals, helping them. Because at the end of the day, even if you're homeless, you still have a sense of care. And we provided that care by showing up, by cleaning up their area, by making sure at the end of the day, they know that we're there for them. And if they need the help is there. They just need to do it.
I guess what I'm asking is, are you seeing more families, people with children? Are you seeing more single men?
It's a
single
variety,
women, older, younger? What does the population look like that you run into on a regular basis?
Regular basis, usually males over 40. Every once in a while, we'll have some teenagers. When Harborside was open, we used to get a couple families. But I don't see, from Tuesdays and Wednesdays when I'm out doing my rounds, I typically don't see families out. Typically, it's older males. Every once in a while, we'll run into some females. But typically, it's males.
I don't know if you can answer this question. Maybe somebody else will be able to answer it. But when these 24-hour notices will be given out, what resources, if any, will be going or taking place the next day when the outreach team goes out? I don't know who all is going to go out, but what's that going to look like?
Yeah, I could certainly help with that question. And one of the things that we discussed as a team is obviously going out as a team and offering the resources like we do on a typical Wednesday outreach. And that includes police, park ranger, a case manager, social worker, benefits coordinator, all the plethora of services that we have, being able to go out there and offer them that. And of course, we have the shelter. If someone is ready and willing, we would absolutely love for them to get into our shelter. So that's what it would look like, going out there with the complement of resources that we have available to us.
So I like that. I guess going back to the shelter, that part of it. How somebody comes out, you gave them the 24-hour notice, you come out. How does that happen when you reach that person and say, by the way, we have services for you, we also have a shelter, and then what do you think are the obstacles that are stopping them from being able to get into that shelter? Or do you think that majority of them just are like, I don't want to go in there, or I have other resources? So barriers that might happen, and also what do you see as the response when you offer that?
And I should note, to piggyback off of what Lieutenant Pinedo said, we do, the days for posting are Tuesdays, Wednesdays. That's when we do our big coordinated outreach. But we do have a full team, as you saw when I mentioned and presented the team, is we do have a complete team now. So now where we used to operate from Tuesday through Friday, now it's Monday through Friday. And we have 4 lieutenant, we have a sergeant, we have an agent, and then 3 officers. So we have a full team. In addition to that, you have housing staff. So what it typically looks like is, we start on Monday, we begin our week. Tuesdays, we do the posting. Wednesday, we go with coordinated outreach. And then the rest of the week, we're doing follow-ups because, as you mentioned, sometimes they're not ready or they need to compile their stuff, whatnot. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that's what we do. We follow up. We assess what their needs are, whether it's detox, if they need detox. We have a partnership with McAllister. We get them the help that they need. We are a low barrier. If they're ready to go that day, we take them in that day. If it's not the shelter that's good, the right place for them, then we have partnerships with Salvation Army. We also have the Rescue Mission in National City, who has been a fantastic partner. So depending on the level of need, but it doesn't end on Wednesdays when we do outreach, it just continues.
So when we say low barrier, that's for the shelter? And what do we consider a low barrier to get into that shelter?
There's a lot of misconceptions. For one, that we don't allow pets. That's one of the barriers. Absolutely not. We have a kennel and we have a dog run for them that was donated by the Police Foundation. As far as drugs are concerned, you don't have to be clean to get into the shelter. We're having a conversation and we've asked the question, did you use today? Well, yes. But if they're able to engage and they're ready to go into the shelter, we will absolutely get them into the shelter.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So ultimately, the goal is to get them off the streets.
Absolutely, and as Megan mentioned, with some of the lawsuits that had occurred with Martin versus Boise and with Grants Pass, the whole idea behind it was that there weren't sufficient beds to accommodate those that were being cleared from the streets. As I mentioned before, we have a wide variety of housing tools, starting with a hotel motel voucher. We need it. We don't need that anymore because we do have the shelter as emergency and transitional housing, but we go all the way up to permanent with our tenant-based rental assistance program and some of our units that the city owns. So the idea is to be able to provide the housing, and we have those housing tools. We invest millions of dollars to be able to provide that variety of housing that, depending on what the needs are, the individual needs are. So if the question is, do you have enough beds today? If everybody was willing and able, absolutely.
So I got one more question. When I look at the map and it looks like the campsites are basically city areas, but then what does that leave behind? I mean, like, I live in a neighborhood and I have people that come and start to set up little camps at the end of my street. And now we're looking at something that, it's going to be more in the residential areas now. Is that something we've thought about or looked into to see how that's going to impact our family community? I mean, again, we're looking at the whole city, but I'm talking about like our neighborhoods where we're at.
Yeah, and so obviously, this discussion is still ongoing, right? And we talked about adding every single bus stop at one point, but we know that some bus lines go all along Third Avenue and in Orange, so they intersect. So really, almost the entire city would have been covered, right? So we really decided against that and went to the 500-foot buffer. And so we don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? This is something that we're going to have for the first time. And so the goal is for the clients to accept the help. That's the ultimate goal, right? We don't want to keep pushing them around. We don't want to push them from one area, from point A to point B. We want them to accept the services and get off the streets. That's the ultimate goal. I guess time will tell exactly what the end result of our plan is. And if we have to get more strict, then I think we can shift in that direction. But I think this is a good starting point because as a team, we agreed this would be a good, good jump-off starting point for us.
And Lieutenant, maybe you could cover a little bit about private property and the ways that residents can address that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're part of our team is our court enforcement, who are a huge asset. They're the ones that deal with private property and how they go about enforcing, because we're starting to see some homeless go onto private property. And so therefore, our partners in court enforcement are the ones that are coming into play to working with the business or property owner to effectively clean out those encampments. And, we'll advise them and provide them any guidance that they need. But oftentimes, some areas are not occupied by the owner, right? They're like in another part of the town or another part of the country for that matter. And so it's their difficult job to find the rightful owner to notify them about the private property that's being overtaken by the homeless. And because the last thing we want is this huge encampment on private property where it's going to be very difficult and challenging to clean.
One of the things that I'd like to get a little bit more insight from our housing staff is all the cities are impacted by this overturn of Boise. And so there's been a lot of movement from the city of San Diego to Chula Vista to Santee to other cities. And so what is our strategic plan long-term in having more of a coordinated approach between the other cities? Because right now we're shifting people from here to there. And, as we draw boundaries, we're going to have less and less locations and spaces. And I would like to see a coordinated approach in the way that we move forward.
And that's exactly what we're doing. One of the things that we're working with right now regionally is working at the staff level with all of the other different cities, because we recognize that we are all moving in the same direction and we are going to be affected. So what we're doing is, one, we do have the HMIS program that we use, but in addition to that, we have another program that we are starting to work with, where we could track the clients, we could see where the clients are connected, what city they were connected to, and that way be able to do the warm handoff to the other jurisdiction instead of just starting from scratch here. It's not that we say, well, you're not from Chula Vista, we're not going to help you. Absolutely, that's not the case. That's exactly what we want to do, is help you, not start from, the first step. And I've had really good experience, for example, with the city of El Cajon. I've done it 3 times where we've seen in the HMII system that they were already connected to resources in El Cajon. I called my counterpart in El Cajon and said, okay, I have this family, what can I do? And he said, send them to me, and immediately they were able to be transported, and the housing plan continued. So that's exactly what we plan to do. Right now, we're doing it in the south, a little bit in the east, and we're expanding north, because we do recognize that we are all going to be affected. Doing the point-in-time count, we did see a lot from our neighboring cities, right? We saw National City, a lot of El Cajon, a lot of East County. So those are the cities that we want to work with and have that partnership and that system where it's easy for us to just pick up the phone and say, hey, I have one of your families, what can we do? How do we transport? Where do we leave them? We don't want to just keep passing them around. So we have been successful with a few people, and that's what we intend to do, keep it more at the staff level, but it's been successful.
So item 4 and 5, which are the recreational vehicles and abandoned shopping carts. So we're going to address those at a later date. Is that the plan? Okay.
I just wanted to ask, have you done the research on other cities that have passed ordinances like this? And how did it affect their residential neighborhoods? And do you guys have any information on that?
The only city that I spoke to was the city of El Cajon because they did implement these the years back. I don't remember the exact year, but what he said is that they didn't see a big impact. If anything, it really has helped them.
No, I haven't heard anything from other jurisdictions either. From what I've seen is that they've been focused on similar areas. Most have those. The city of San Diego's really has major transit stops, some parks, environmentally sensitive areas, some of the same things. I haven't heard feedback saying that that's pushing people into residential communities, but I think we're all kind of learning what will and won't happen, although San Diego's has been in place for a while.
If I can just add, I know the city of San Diego, when they did their ordinance enforcement in the downtown area, they were able to successfully clean that area, but also they worked in conjunction with safe camping. So they were able to successfully move not only an individual, but groups of individuals that were congregating together in downtown into the safe camping. So, obviously that's something that we're going to be exploring as well, but they were able to successfully clean that area when they started to enforce, and the people started to accept the help, even if it was going into a safe camping environment.
And if I could piggyback on that, so when we were talking about having the housing options, different housing options depending on the level of need, that is one of the housing tools that we were looking at implementing, the safe camping. So we did apply for a grant with the state of California, and if we are successful, that is the next step. And we will hopefully be adding that to our housing inventory, bringing in a safe camping similar to San Diego, but at a smaller scale.
I have a question about encampments. So once the encampments are cleared of persons and debris, what happens to those encampments? Are they fenced off? Are they restricted in any area or in any way from anyone to use again?
So are you talking right after we post the notices? What do we do right after that?
Yeah, so if you clear an encampment and it's already cleared of debris, do you put a fence around it? How do you restrict that area from being used again?
So typically when we post a notice and we show up, 99.9% of the time they clear out. The trash is left behind, we pick it up, and we just go about our day. Industrial was a different animal. We had to fence that whole area off, and it's stayed clean ever since we put the fence up. Obviously, we do have to paper pick every once in a while because it's not just the unhoused individuals making a mess, unfortunately. But typically, when we post notices, people do vacate.
So it's not something where they stay away for a week and then I look again in a week and I have another 10 families there?
No, typically what happens is they'll either go across the street, they'll walk down, 100 yards. But once we post notices, they know, whatever they can carry, they're going to take with them. They'll leave the trash behind. But I just want to mention in COVID, typically I was posting about 65 notices. Currently right now I'm posting about 10 notices. So it's been a huge change by just working with the team and, going out and talking to people. If they are on Caltrans or MTS, we do have contacts with them. We do take photos. We do send it out to the different jurisdictions, but I can't go inside and clean up their area. I just want to make that clear is they're notified, they know what's in their area, and we kind of leave it at that.
I'd also add from the fencing perspective, it is sometimes complicated. It's expensive to buy the fencing and then to attach it to an infrastructure that may or may not be there. And then there are other considerations about, for example, even when we put up fencing on industrial, I think, traffic engineers have to look at how that's put up and if it's obstructing a vision for, there's a lot of surprising considerations in putting up fencing. And if we had to put up fencing everywhere around the city, it would be a lot of fencing. So, yeah, I mean, I understand why you would ask that, of course, and it would be helpful to keep people out of areas, but it has been a challenge for the city.
My second question is the 24-hour notice with the storage for 90 days. So I'm assuming that the storage would be, say, important paperwork, IDs, passports, birth certificates, things like that. Is it a storage facility, or are we actually scanning these documents into some sort of like media file?
So typically, when we actually store people's belongings, we bag everything up, and typically, if we know exactly who it is, their name goes on it. We store in our facility up to 90 days. And typically, if they want to come get it, they have to make an appointment. It's a very easy process. But again, since 2016 up until now, it's probably been about 5 or 10 people that actually come back and actually claim their belongings.
And then after those 90 days, is it just destroyed?
Yes.
Okay. Is anything actually scanned, like important documents, IDs, birth certificates, passports, any?
No, ma'am, because typically when we actually go through the stuff, either they're taking their stuff with them that they really want. Typically, if they're leaving stuff behind, it's just items, couches, mattresses, things of that nature, but not their personal IDs or medicine or stuff like that.
And then if we had an issue on private property, say someone's home, do we call the EMS system 911, or are we calling a non-emergency line? How does the public reach out to you? Say outreach team, is there a number that we call? How do we typically get a hold of someone?
So if we're speaking about an encampment on someone's home, is that, I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, so say I own a home, they're in my driveway. Would I activate a 911? Would I do non-emergency?
99.9% of the people call the police department. And so then the officers will go out and assess it. And then they'll realize, okay, well, it's on private property. Then we pass that information. We'll provide them the number to code enforcement, because code enforcement is the one that, now we'll work with the homeowners and say, you can clear them out. You can take the property. And so obviously the lowest level of conversation that should be had is the officers telling the people in the encampment, you need to move, you're on private property, the owner wants you to move, right? We have a program where property owners can complete a trespass letter, and which allows us to be their agent to be able to enforce on their property. So those are avenues that we can take to help them. If it's, say, an abandoned structure that they gain access to, that's when we rely on code enforcement to assist us with that, find the owner, because it would be unfair for code enforcement to find the owner when they have absolutely no idea there's someone's on their property. So, find the owner, notify them, let them know, hey, there's someone on your property. Work with the police department to get it cleared out, so that way they don't assess any fines on them. And so that's kind of how, we work to handle camps on private property.
And also, just to add to Lieutenant Pinedo, typically we get a lot of see-click fix, and we handle those. Like Lieutenant was saying, we work very closely with code enforcement. So a lot of times people are leaving, shopping carts and abandoned items, and we'll go by, we'll assess the situation, and either we'll discard the items or we'll post a notice.
And on that, let's say cul-de-sac, end of the road, no houses at the end of the road, but it is a cul-de-sac closed off. Somebody sets in, and it's let's say it's my neighborhood, and that somebody sets up camp there because now they're not able to go where they were going before. But there's this cul-de-sac. There's nobody's home that they're really disturbing, but they're end of that road. How does that look for the homeowner? How does that look for not the homeowner, but the residents in that neighborhood?
As a starter, and I can let Lieutenant Pineda, even though I called you Officer Pineda earlier, respond, but if they're on the actual road, we would be able to remove them because they would be on a vehicular like pathway. So that would be straightforward.
Right, so we would have to go and assess right? If they're on the road, like she said, they'd have to move. If they're on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk, obviously that's not something that's gonna be allowed. If they go on to the dirt, grass, bushes area there, then we'd have to figure out, is it city property, what is it, right? And then go from there. And obviously, we need to one is getting to know the individual who's there and what led them to go there. But, you know, as the ordinance states, if that is something that we encounter once it's in play, the ordinance meaning, then we offer them the resources and post on their encampment says, hey, accept our services, right? Our goal is to get them off the street. Otherwise, you're gonna have to move because you're not gonna be allowed to be here.
And staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that most individuals and house people are moving into abandoned properties, typically not inhabited properties or areas where lots of people are circulating, but typically abandoned commercial or residential properties.
Yeah, we're seeing an increase of that. Some buildings that are unoccupied and they're starting to go into those properties.
That being said, I see them going into vacant businesses, warehouses, things like that. So, I've been seeing a lot of that lately.
So I have a question with regard to your comment. If you encounter someone taking up residence in an abandoned or a vacant home, let's say, how is that addressed? What is the process? Is it now notification and then now they're considered residents of the property? How would that work?
We have our code enforcement manager, Brian Catacooten, coming up to answer that.
Good evening, Brian Catacooten, Code Enforcement Manager. So, yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of abandoned properties. Most recently, if you haven't heard, there was 707, was it F's? Where Shea Holmes is? The Shea Holmes property. Moss. Yeah, a lot of times it's an educational effort from code enforcement. Our job is really to try to find the property owner. Like my colleagues mentioned, a lot of times they're not aware there's even people or squatters on their property. So first and foremost, our job is try to find and identify who the owners are, try to find a property manager, make contact and educate them on what they can do to try to prohibit some of these activities. Like Mr. Pinedo says, a lot of this leads to that trespass letter that we issued, which is very effective at most times. We also offer different solutions like maybe putting up fencing or adding cameras or hiring security. In vacant parcels, we recommend maybe just kind of trimming some bushes, some overgrown, camping there. So, it's really tough because like staff mentioned, we don't want to punish business owners punitively, right? Because they are victims in some ways. So we're here just trying to help, offering solutions to kind of abate the issues.
And I'll add that if we have someone that's really resistant to doing something about it and they've been notified repeatedly, there are legal mechanisms that we can use, going to court, basically declaring the property like a nuisance property. And we could even have like a third party, it's called a receiver, come in and take control of the property, move the people out, and it can be paid for by attaching a lien to the property. So if we really have someone that's resistant to taking care of a problem, we've notified them and it's causing a health and safety risk to the community, because sometimes we have fires and things like that. You might have remember the Wiener Schnitzel that used to be on Broadway for a while. I think we had several fires there with people camped there. So if it gets to that point, then often there are more extreme measures that we can take using the court system.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, is there any more questions, comments?
I'd like to make a quick comment. It seems like all the solutions that are being provided with all the different areas where people are not going to be allowed to camp or where they'll be cleared out, the focus seems to be on offering compassionate alternatives to those people who are on the streets. So it's not a question of just simply pushing people out. It is coupled with giving notice and asking people to move because it can be a safety hazard. Bring an alternative to these people so they have somewhere to go, they can get services. It's a compassionate removal of these people from the streets and from the camping areas so that they're able to move on with their lives with other services if need be.
If you'd like to make a
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Commissioners?
The public comment, I do have comments after, but I'd like to hear what she has to say.
Okay. I do. Francis.